Welcome, everybody, to MSP Confidential. It's Friday, February 2nd, and here we are once again for a great episode. I've got a wonderful guest today, my friend, my amigo, my taco companion, Mr. Martin DesRosiers. I'm going to bring him up on the screen in a minute. Or how about now? Because, that's just uh,
Hello.
how cool Mr. Martino is. Martino, welcome to the MSP Confidential live stream, man. How have you been?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, Martin and I go way back. I think we've been in the same circles for over 10 years. We worked together a little while at Fully Managed. But you got your start also in the IT industry, as many of us do, as an owner operator of a small one person shop. At the time, it was called Black Heron Technology. You're sort of multifaceted because you're like really into branding, you're really into coffee, you're really into sneakers, you're really into food. I think I had a guest stint on your Foodzilla food blog at one point, even.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Do you have a
man, like
review though?
bring some of this into a focus for me. What got you started with technology, and now you're the regional CEO for Lyra Technology Group after a Nucleus was acquired. Lyra is part of Evergreen Services, which a lot of people are familiar with, and so it's an interesting, obviously, track record. And so,
Yeah. Lots of different things. Where do you want me to start?
well, what got you into technology? I think it's always sort of an interesting thing, people realizing they love technology and then realizing they also have to love helping people with technology. That's sometimes there's a little bit of a separation of
Totally.
things there, but curious on your start in the journey of technology.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I think back, it started with my Commodore 64. My first computer, just kind of learning, the command prompt to start a game, being able to crack games and edit the game to manipulate the game itself. That really kind of spurred that passion for tech. And then, in terms of a career, I think ultimately I actually didn't pursue tech as a career initially. All the way up until grade 12, I actually wanted to become a vet. Loved animals, was tunnel vision on a vet, got accepted into the program at UBC to, I think it was agricultural sciences. And then you had to go to a vet school, I think in Saskatchewan. So at the last minute, I just pivoted. I said, you know what, I want to go into business, whatever that means. My uncle was a successful sales executive, and I was, I saw his lifestyle, and I was like, what, I want to do something like that, right? And so ended up going to Cap University. I think I was there for 3 years, and then realized I had people a year ahead of me getting their degree and weren't able to find jobs. Some of them are actually applying at Starbucks with their Bachelor of Commerce, and I was like, okay, that's not a good sign, right?
Not what I
So
planned. Yeah.
yeah, so I ended up pivoting to BCIT. I did a lot of research. I found this program that was, you get your certifications. So back in 2001, I went the network specialist program at BCIT and got my MCSE, CCNA, A plus, VCP. So really, really technical hands-on, while I was employed doing help desk as well. So I got my first IT job at the time while I was going to BCIT. So that was really kind of the start of my IT career, if you will.
Hmm. And BCIT back then was a polytechnic institute. Yeah, today it has a university status and offers like full blown
That's
bachelor's
right.
degrees. But back then it was kind of the 1 year program or 2 year programs type of
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, it was basically like you're guaranteed a job. That was kind of like their pitch, like you were going to get an education, but also like almost guaranteed that you had employers lining up to hire you. And ultimately, having BCIT, I think on the resume, if you will, that has been beneficial. So
Hmm.
um,
Well, and let me bring up something that I think you've been doing ever since you got to Nucleus. Correct me if I'm wrong or keep me honest here, but you have maintained a relationship with BCIT all these years. You've always gone back, sort of gotten involved with some of their graduating classes,
that's right.
hired into sort of your own apprenticeship program at Nucleus from the BCIT program. Just tell me a little bit about the thought process behind that. How has that had an effect on, bringing tech talent into the business? Because I think this is something a lot of people struggle with in the MSP industry today with.
Yeah, we have a really close relationship, or Nucleus has a close relationship with BCIT. When I joined Nucleus in 2013, we were around a dozen people. And, one of the things, actually it started at Fully Managed. We started, that relationship with BCIT in terms of like, hey, there's good programs. These are great candidates for roles that we have. And I'm a firm believer in giving back. Somebody gave me that opportunity when I was 20 years old with no tech experience, just fresh out of BCIT, actually still going to BCIT at the time, and gave me a chance to learn. On the job experience, first office job, thrown right into it. And I'll never forget that, right? Just giving that opportunity, because some people are like, oh, you need 3 years experience, you need 5 years experience. Whereas, the reality is some of these BCIT students are, they have a lab at home, they're learning on the side, they're, getting a good hands-on education. And so that's been a really successful relationship for Nucleus. If I look back over the last 10 years, there's probably at least a dozen people that came through BCIT that are still at Nucleus. There's a lot of BCIT alumni at Nucleus, so some of the executive team, some of the management team, and just it's a good place for students to get some real world experience, right? It's one thing to do that 1-2 year program, but come into your co-op at Nucleus, go back for your last year. We make we give students an offer, so when they're done their program, they can get a full-time job back at Nucleus. So it's been good for Nucleus, but also good for people that go to BCIT.
Yeah, and definitely not an overnight success. Obviously, like this was probably a program that took 5 years plus to develop into something that started to show, fruits, if you will. And I guess that's maybe the crux of the issue for a lot of MSPs is, their tech challenge, hiring challenge is now. And so sort of getting through a bit of the crunch is difficult and what they need to do. But I guess my point is the message is it's worthwhile investing on a long-term bench type of program where you're sort of developing the talent right from the school days, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if I think back over the last 10 years, it's the talent aspect, but it's also, like I say, I'm a firm believer in giving back, right? And we spent a lot of time doing industry tours. When we had a large office downtown, we used to bring the class down to the office, give them a tour of the NOC, the operations, tell them what managed services is. And for some people, this is the first time seeing like a real tech company, in person. So, mock interviews, things like that, really just helping the students, prepare for, potentially their first job. So,
yeah, that's really cool. Love that. Well, on the career progression bit, I think it's interesting too, because obviously, and I've had a number of these conversations over the last few weeks. As a small shop, sometimes providing a career pathing option to new hires looks a little bleak because there's not just a lot of places to go. So, people have to develop a little bit of their own aptitudes, their own skills. And obviously, as your company grows, then there's more opportunities, there's more branches, so to speak, in the business that people can develop into. Now you've gone through a number of different roles yourself, obviously from help desk all the way to CDO to CEO, but I've been dying to ask you, do you actually like being CEO? And I ask that question because a lot of MSPs that are owner operated, it's the de facto situation that they find themselves in, but they don't necessarily enjoy being a CEO, so to speak.
yeah, I mean, to answer your question directly, love it. I think I've used this analogy before. It's a role where you're getting attacked by an octopus like every day. Like there's just different arms coming at you, different things. I like a dynamic work environment. I don't like the same day every day. You know what I mean? So I think ultimately in the CEO seat, you're involved in everything: people, culture, HR, operations, support, growth, sales, marketing. That's personally where I like to be. And the reality is, I knew early on in my tech career, so going from help desk to sysadmin to senior technical analyst to starting my own little IT company that was bought by Networks, which rebranded to Fully Managed, and was a part of the leadership team there for a while. There's always someone smarter than me on the tech side. Initially I was a tech. Initially I was all about the tech, hands-on networking. But I just realized I wasn't the best at that. What I was good at was the interpersonal skills, building relationships, communication, sales and business development. So ultimately I kind of gravitated towards my skill set and my passion. And so, that evolved, over time, but I love the CEO role. I love the pressure, I love the competition. But you're right. Not everybody loves that. Not everybody loves the pressure. And when you're a small operator, everything, you're wearing the chief cook and bottle washer title, right? So,
Yeah.
but when you're larger, you build a great team around you, and it's a lot of fun. So,
Let me ask you about a nuance because I think MSPs, perhaps in their evolution, kind of gravitate, like you said, in your case, you had a bit of a passion towards the sales and marketing side, the business development. But I think there's many MSP owners that very much stay leaning into the technical side of the business. And I'm curious from a, supporting actor perspective, what have been on either side of those things? I guess you can speak more to the sales and marketing side. What's been the most critical supportive role to you as CEO, sort of as now in hindsight looking back to some of the things that helped actually build Nucleus to where it is, and obviously get the exit to Lyra and Evergreen and all that stuff?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's, you know, I default to one thing, but I think there's multiple roles ultimately. Like when you're 12 people and you're growing, and then 20, 30, 40, 50, and now Nucleus is, close to 90. Um, there's so many important roles along that journey. I think ultimately the operations, the execution, it's one thing to have vision, brand, strong sales engine, business, marketing. But if you can't execute at the end of the day, then your reputation is going to suffer, right? You're going to lose clients. You're going to bring on clients. You're going to lose them. And so I think just really being strong on the operations, the support. Ultimately, if you're selling managed services, that really needs to be strong. So my default reaction is on the operations side. Whether it be COO, director of operations, support manager. Those types of roles are critical ultimately to deliver what you're selling. So
Yeah. I think I hear, the stories from MSPs of the thing or the role or person that they wish they had hired sooner tends to be sort of that service desk manager role, which tends to be a bit more on the ops side than it is really the service desk per se, because they are the ones that are really learning to triage and help manage a bit of the resources and such. And so, is there a role that you wish you had hired sooner in your own journey at Nucleus that you wish, shit, I wish we had a COO when we were 12 people and not when, waited until we were 20 or 30.
yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked that question before. I mean, I think every business is different. Every market, the journey is going to be different. The skill sets of the leadership team. Some people can wear multiple hats. Some people can't, right? Um, I'm trying to think of like what would be the one role. You know, I think at a certain size, like having a dedicated marketing individual has been really beneficial. Historically, that's kind of lived on my plate. Like it's been one of the hats I've worn. But the reality is, you can only move so far and so fast.
Mm,
Trying to wear multiple hats, and I think, the reality is having that person dedicated that's good at their job. You kind of look back and you're like, oh, I should have done that. That would have helped, a couple years ago, kind of thing. So that's like one role, but there's probably a few other ones that I can think
sure.
of for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Another nuance, sort of along the lines of the hindsight is always 2020, is I think there's people tend to agree that there are certain inflection points in the growth path of an MSP, whether it's going from 5 to 10 people or going from 10 to 15 or 15 to 25. And there's certain operational challenges that surface at every one of those inflection points that are slightly different. And I'm curious if there's any one of those sort of transition periods that sticks out a little bit for you, in terms of we could have done this a little bit differently, or this is something we did really well. Curious on your thoughts there.
Yeah, there's so many things I've learned, and I'm sure there's more, when you hit 100, 150, 200, right? And
Yeah,
so, I think the project team is one that stands out. Like ultimately, when you're a small MSP, your support people are probably doing consulting and project work as well, right? They're a bit of a hybrid role. But I think ultimately we had to carve out that professional services team from our managed services team just because of the volume, right? Having so many projects, not being able to deliver fast enough. So that was definitely a place where we had to, change roles and add roles. I think also when it came to service delivery, I think ultimately, what we didn't want to be was some massive service desk where, everybody just became a number, and the support experience felt that way. Like it was just like nobody knew anything about the business anymore. There was no personalization. There was no familiarity with the techs. And so I think moving to the pod model as an MSP was really successful, because ultimately what we were trying to do, we were trying to preserve that personalized IT department approach. And so the client shouldn't feel our scale. If we're scaling rapid growth, growing like crazy, adding people, adding clients, client number one that you had, for the last 10 years shouldn't feel that, you know what I mean? And really the only way to do that is by segmenting, I think, the service delivery. So the pod model, I think at Nucleus has been really successful, just to maintain that quick response, friendly, people know your business, people know your technology. So that's been another, when I look back in terms of the journey, that was a critical moment as well.
I think people in slightly larger MSPs that are in the tiered help desk model would maybe argue that the pod model doesn't scale. And so I suppose you could, easily prove them wrong on that. But I'm curious of your articulated arguments for, how you got the pod model to work sort of at scale. Because I think you can replicate each of the pods as you grow. You just have to be connected to the needs of the business ahead of the crunch in resourcing, of course. But curious on your thoughts on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fine balance. I mean, I think ultimately there's no exact science behind it, right? Some people look at like, okay, how much MRR are the people servicing? Like, what's that ratio of tech to MRR and effective rate and profitability? And I think, when I think of Nucleus as the example, I believe we're at 6 or 7 pods now. And so we've figured out the formula that works to replicate what we need to service X amount of volume and revenue. And, Nucleus is a great testament of, a formula that works, a playbook that works based on, service delivery metrics, based on, financial performance. And so, I look at it like, don't fix what's not broken, right? If you're in your golden KPIs, hitting response time, resolution time, CSAT, your effective rate strong, you're a healthy company, you're creating career paths for your team. I think I'm not too sure where that you'd want to change that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Nucleus did pilot the tier 1 model. But I think, you lose a little bit of that personalization. I think that's what people, especially when you're selling to SMBs, right? I think they don't want the large telco experience necessarily, where you call the help desk, tier 1 is asking you if you've rebooted, but you've already, you get a bit frustrated because of course they're rebooted. Yeah. And then, okay, we need to get you to tier 2. They'll call you back within 2 hours. It's like, can you just like help me out? Like, I got you on the phone. So, Nucleus didn't want to be that large call center type experience. It wanted to always maintain that feeling of like, Nucleus is 12 people and everybody, you talk to the same people every day. And the only way to do that is by creating those pockets.
Yeah, no, I believe in the model wholly because my own MSP, we kind of had the pod model. In fact, we used that as a selling feature against the larger MSPs in the city, exactly, who would often lose out to us because the client in that moment recognized how their experience or service would suffer not having that personalized approach. And so it was always good for us. I remember Nucleus heavily promoting no contracts on the website, and I'm not sure if that's still the case. Maybe that's changed under the umbrella of a large services group. But I'm curious how much that affected your go-to-market strategy. Was it an effective way to get a actual funnel working? Tell me a bit about that no contract strategy.
Well, early days at Nucleus, we were trying to look at it like, okay, well, what's our differentiators? What's our value prop? We can't just say the same thing everybody else is saying. And ultimately we moved to the no contract pitch, which was, 30-day cancellation. There was no long-term, some MSPs at the time were making clients sign a 3-year PO, like essentially a 3-year commit with no out. And, we had a lot of confidence. We were coming from a place of like, we knew what we had. We knew what our team could deliver on. Our clients loved us. We had a ton of good case studies, ton of good references. And we wanted to earn your business every month. We didn't want to sit back on a contract. We had that level of confidence where, we were going to deliver what we were selling. We're not going to oversell, underdeliver. We're going to sell this vision, this dream. This is what we're going to do for you as your IT partner. And we have to earn that every single month. And after 30 days, the clock resets to 0, and we got to do that same thing again. You know what I mean? And that really pushed every aspect of our business to focus on continuous improvement, to focus on optimization, to focus on getting better. Like, we really wanted to be the best at what we did. And, up until 2022, 2023, and this had nothing to do with, Evergreen, this was fully an internal decision. we went to a 90-day cancellation. So it's still, I would say average, if not lower than some other MSPs, but we've had that Nucleus had that 30-day thing for 9 years, and that was, our client churn was still relatively low, well below industry average. And that was because, we challenged ourselves every month. We had to hit the KPIs, we had to hit the metrics. Clients can leave if they're not happy, and it should be like that. If you're delivering a poor service, you don't want to lean back on your long-term contract and say, well, you're kind of stuck with us for 2 years. That's just, I don't like that way of doing business. So it's been that 30-day out for a long time.
Yeah, on that topic, I think complacency in general plagues a lot of the IT businesses that are out there doing this managed services work, and I guess help me understand how that plays a role sort of at the 90-person mark, because I feel like some aspects of the business become a little siloed. Maybe there's a little bit more difficulty sharing that nuanced client sentiment across the different teams. And so, how do you avoid complacency at scale, I guess, is the question.
I mean, I think just being a KPI driven organization is one thing that I think about. Like ultimately, one of Nucleus's core values is culture of accountability. And so, it's all about, who's responsible for what, who needs to be accountable. We treat everybody like professionals. Everybody knows what the definition of success is for their role. It's clearly identified. It's, transparent on their job description. Here's your core KPIs that you need to focus on. And so, everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody's tracking those metrics. And so really just trying to build that culture of accountability, right? And I think that's just a mind shift. We're not sitting back on these long contracts. People love their job, people care about their clients. But yeah, KPIs are like one thing I think about, because I think, it's not all MSPs track KPIs. Not every MSP knows, are they sinking or swimming? And I think that's something that it's important to surface those things,
Maybe this is an interesting opportunity to pivot into your coffee business, only because I think on the KPI front, it's interesting to think about the MSP industry is maybe well academically served by KPI, knowledge and best practices and all these things. And it's not that difficult to ask around and figure out sort of what are the key KPIs and things you could be doing at all sizes of the evolution of the business. But starting a coffee business from scrap, I feel like maybe there's more questions than answers at any given point. And I'm curious, a bit of the mental model translation between, the IT industry and the coffee business, because I think this is maybe also how MSPs can help their clients understand their performance and how they can really start to get technology to be the lever that they use to drive outcomes properly inside of those client businesses. I think that's the ultimate challenge, right, for MSPs is like, how do you become an integral, critical part of your customers' growth? And otherwise, you're just going to fall prey to the commoditization of the industry overall. But anyway, so back to this idea of the coffee business and starting from scratch, take me through a bit of the thought process there.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a serial entrepreneur. I've always kind of had a side hustle, always done something on the side. Think back to my IT career. I mean, that's how I started Black Heron. That's how, Chris Day reached out one day saying, I liked what you're doing. I was selling Google Apps at the time quite aggressively, promoting the cloud, which was in 2006, not very common, so it was a bit cutting edge. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I was on the C bus one day, going to downtown Vancouver. And I was just like, you know what, I'm always used to these consulting type businesses, like the 1-to-1 hour to dollar ratio. And so I was like, you know what, I want to start a product, like that's something that, you could sell. It's like the infinite game of selling to anybody in the world. Right. And so I just kind of said, hey, what product could I sell? And I was like, well, I drink coffee every day. So that's maybe something we could start. So it's really started just with an idea of like, I drink coffee every single day. Maybe it's an area that can be disrupted. And so at the time, one of my other side hustles was laurellonsdale.ca. I owned a domain name and I ran it as like a community hub for a suburb in North Vancouver. And it was a very popular, growing suburb, still is to this day. And somebody approached me about buying the domain name. And so I sold the domain name for 5 figures and used the proceeds to start a coffee company. and initially just started with a bag of coffee, and now have two coffee shops, with an e-commerce component too, and a wholesale component. But yeah, really just started with like, what do I consume every day, and how can I turn that into a product that I can sell? So
Yeah.
a very different brain than food and beverage is compared to managed services. Obviously, drastically different, but a lot of areas that I've learned in my career I can apply in the context of food and beverage, whether it be using technology, whether it be tracking certain metrics, whether it be building culture, marketing, brand. Those things translate and transcend every industry. So
Yeah. I was kind of mentioning this to you in the pre-show green room, so to speak, but I think there's this interesting 40-hour work week stereotype of people attaching outcomes to time spent doing activities. And it's always interesting to talk to a multifaceted person that's working on a number of different things where the concept of time is truly an abstract, like there
yeah,
is, you need to find ways to create impact regardless of the amount of time spent on any one activity. And I'm curious because must get this question from either the people that are acquiring your nucleus company and then coming in and be like, well, so let's talk. I want to talk to Martin about this coffee side business thing. How much time is he spending there? And people have this obsession about the time, but I realize that the impact is sometimes completely unrelated to time. I'm just curious about your ethereal thoughts on this.
yeah. I mean, I saw something yesterday. Actually, it was Elon Musk. Somebody was interviewing him, and he's like, "I wake up in the morning, I go to work, I go to bed, and I do that 7 days a week." And it's not that drastic, but I do work 7 days a week. Work on whether it's tech stuff, whether it's new ideas, whether it's food and beverage. I just like to be busy, right? And for me, I've never been one to like live for the weekend or hate my job for Monday to Friday and just wait for that weekend to come. It's like, no, I want to love what I'm doing every single day of the week. You know what I mean? And so um, I built the coffee business to a point. It's always been transparent with Nucleus, always been transparent with Evergreens, being transparent with Lyra. It actually does not take up a lot of my time because you build the function, you hire the right people, and the business should run itself, right? You empower people, you give people autonomy, you give people responsibility, and they're going to do some great things with it. And so I don't have interest in working on things that are just going to take a ton of my time when it comes to like the side hustle stuff, right? Like it'll become a distraction. My number one focus and priority is Lyra Technology Group, and supporting the Canadian businesses and growing Canada as a market. And outside of that is it's like I look at it as like hobbies and kind of side hustles, right? Just stuff I like to do in my personal time, outside of the gym and family. It's I like to work on my other businesses. So
Well, something that maybe does take a bit of your time is all the complaining you do on Twitter. I'm gonna make
you
fun of
love
you.
that, no? You love that.
I gotta make fun of you here for a minute because that's one of the few things that pulls me into Twitter is to go make fun of your complaining on Twitter. It's
Hilarious.
sort of a meta situation that we got going on there. But it's interesting because I think these are the types of things, downstream from the actual complaint, which is whatever. I think you actually create an interesting level of engagement in social media, whether it's tweeting at Elon or tweeting at Toby about your Shopify e-commerce stuff. And I thought, did I see you guys recently hit the 100,000 order and you got some hardware from Shopify?
Right here, actually. Weighs like 10 pounds. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
We
awesome.
actually hit that in 2020, so we're quite a ways past that number now. But yeah, it's pretty cool for them to send that out.
Yeah. Anyways, no comment needed on the Twitter
Yeah,
complaining, but I just wanted to
I
lighten up the
honestly
mode.
like it's maybe it's a mental thing to just get it off your chest. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's just venting to the void. Except you seem to chime in on my comments, but I've talked to Toby directly. I've talked to certain people directly that I would never have access to without tagging somebody or chirping them repeatedly, and then they fix my problem. They're able to solve my issue or take my feedback and then implement some sort of change. And that's what I love about X and Twitter is just that direct access to some of these
Yeah.
CEOs and people that how else would you get to them? And they're also sitting on Twitter doing different things. And if I email them, that's just going to go to an assistant or somebody, but this is my direct access to that individual. And so there's some power there, right? Sometimes it's just, yeah, I'm just venting about something random. It's not all venting either. You're painting this picture of this toxic feed. I do post a lot of good memes and good content as well. You must get that.
You do, you do. I regularly engage with your ex Twitter content, and so yeah, it's not all bad. I was
It's
just
not all bad. You
throwing
have
you
a
under the.
bot. You have a bot tweeting on yours. Like we could talk about that too, right? You have an automated little. I don't even know if you tweet anymore.
I'm live streaming this to Twitter right now. In fact,
All right, sweet.
yeah, no, but I do have actually shout out to the Tech Tribe because they create sort of these actually interesting technology related posts that MSPs can use, and that's one of the things I throw in on a monthly basis into my Zoho social, and it just kind of keeps a bit of the activity there. I think I started maybe doing this years before it really was even on my radar, but every time I went to look up a business or a vendor that I wanted to work with, if their social feed was like the last post was 3 years old, it always gave me pause. And so I just didn't want to be the person that had a bunch of socials everywhere and there's just no content or no activity on them. And so
Yeah,
that's
makes
one way
sense.
I keep them active.
No, I'm the
Um,
same way. I kind of qualify certain things by just how active are they externally, and is the brand dead? Should I be worried? That's a bit concerning if they're not, active. But if you know, we could talk about social media for a while. I mean, there's pros and cons of I think certain channels, but it's all about how you use them. You know what I mean, and who you follow and what you want to consume. So
Yeah, no doubt. I think I spend more time. I call it my de facto educational medium, which is TikTok, and it's because maybe at this point the algorithm has picked up that I kind of rewatch a lot of the business friendly topics or the investment friendly topics, and so now it just feeds me a bunch of that stuff, and so I do enjoy and I learn a ton. I deal in quotes, I deal in little tidbits of knowledge that I pick up from social media platforms that they give me pause to think about. So it is kind of an interesting feeder mechanism for me to actually consider points of view that I may have not considered if I hadn't been listening. So it's kind of been good for me in that respect. I like it for triggering me to think about stuff, if nothing else. I don't necessarily go and complain about it,
yeah,
but
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I like the bite-sized chunks of information and quotes and thought
yeah.
leadership pieces just to make you reflect. And um, there's definitely some good, but there's definitely some bad content on there too.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, on this sort of journey of talking to some of these CEOs like Toby, and I wanted to ask if there's anything you could share about one of those conversations that resulted, from the chirping to an actual outcome that was significant to you, because I think that there's something to be learned there. And in the service industry, we see this all the time as MSPs. The noisy wheel gets the grease type of thing, the squeaky wheel. And so I think there's some value to do that effectively, obviously, not just for the sake of doing it necessarily, but tell me if you can share any one of those particular experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit obscure, but it was relevant to my situation. Like we're a big Shopify shop, not only from an e-commerce standpoint, but also from a, brick and mortar standpoint. So both retail locations use Shopify end to end for, payment terminal through the app, the point of sale, all that fun stuff. And in Canada specifically, so Shopify is a Canadian company, but they release a lot of these things US first, right? And there's a bit of a lag, sometimes a long lag before it's available for Canadian merchants, which is, a bit frustrating as a Canadian merchant, subscribing to a Canadian company that is, releasing things to the US customers and other customers before Canada. And it was something specific to digital tipping on their new tap and chip reader. So they released I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but historically they had Moneris as their payment terminal that was integrated with Shopify, and that was kind of the default tap and chip reader that had integrated tipping for Canadian merchants. And so Shopify killed that integration and went all in with their own hardware, with their own software, enclosed ecosystem for tap and chip and payment processing and so on. However, in Canada, it didn't support digital tips. And so you can appreciate being in food and beverage that tipping is a huge component of, an employee's income. And so it was a bit short-sighted saying like, okay, well, we had this functionality before, and now we can't get it with this new hardware. think at the time maybe the US had it and it was coming to Canada. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. You got existing customers. And so ended up escalating up the tree and talking to the right people, getting put into the right, person that's managing product. And that got expedited as a feature update to come to Canadian customers. So I don't know, maybe it would have taken 6 months if I didn't, chirp at them long enough. But that's just a good example of like, just having that direct access to the right person that could put me in touch with the right person versus trying to go through support. Sometimes, makes a difference. So,
Yeah. I think that sort of brings the topic of community into view a little bit. Certainly you've probably encountered a Shopify community out there, and from the MSP perspective, I think we've been used to sort of living inside our vendor communities, living inside our peer communities. A lot of the MSP growth happens through peer groups and conversations with like-minded individuals. Curious about your peer type experiences sort of in the history of growth for Nucleus, and now obviously now in Lyra, then there's a whole other set of peers running parts of different companies inside of the same umbrella. So the impact of community to you is, I guess, the question.
yeah, I mean, huge. I think that when I look back to the success, my personal success and just, the success of Nucleus, the network and the community is like up there in the top three, top five, I would say. Just having the people, we used to do, I'm pretty sure you came to a few of these, but we used to do beer clocks at the office, once a month, and, partners, clients, prospects, and they were packed. Like our office was absolutely packed. We did different meetups. I think now being a part of Evergreen and Lyra, the community is just on another level. Like we were just down in Florida for the Lyra CEO summit, and so just being around CEOs, COOs, other executives that are part of the Lyra group. Just everybody's inspired, motivated, excited, ready to go after 2024. And I think last summer it was an Evergreen CEO conference in Denver. There's hundreds of people, but it's such a positive experience, and everybody's just, the vibe and the atmosphere was amazing, right? So just being able to network with other people in the same industry, maybe smaller, larger, dealing with different things, being able to collaborate, being able to reach out to certain people around, hey, has anybody used this tool, this technology? Just that knowledge network that, I have access to is just, I can't think of another place where you can get that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about communities that is kind of the intrinsic driver of them is this concept of shared values. And it's possible that we don't talk about them too much in the IT industry, but there's a bit of this understanding, I guess you could call it, that we share a certain baseline of values around how we interact with clients, the things that we are ensuring that they're well protected against, whether it's cybersecurity stuff or otherwise. Or just the accountability or commitment to the client. And I'm curious if you think about shared values, how you talk about this to your people, because you talked about this core value of shared accountability or accountability at Nucleus. And I think there's more nuance than just, owning an issue from beginning to end. There's all these sort of levels and details of it. And so, expand, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm, this goes back to, the early days of David Reeve, fully managed, before fully managed was fully managed. I think it goes back to like Vern Harnish, Gazelle's, this was when we first probably crossed paths when you were Monkey Mac Consulting, and, we were fully managed at the time was using you for block time Mac consulting, right? That's where our paths initially crossed. And before, the rebrand, we went through that whole exercise of, vision definition, mission, core values, really defining those things at the essence of like what the company, who are we, why do we get out of bed in the morning? What are we promising to our customers? And so that's always stuck with me, it's something that like I've realized the importance of having that, just something that you can attach everything to and, bake that into everything you do, every conversation that you have with the customer, every time you onboard a new employee, you kind of walk them through like, here's Nucleus, here's the mission we're on, here's our vision, here's our brand promise, here's our core values, and here's why all these things are important. And they're not, it's not something that it's not set and forget, right? We're not going to talk about it this one time. You're going to go through this HR onboarding process and that's it. They're living and breathing things that you see all over the place, that comes up often. Everything is kind of tied to, living those core values. I always tell people, like, if you ever sit there and wonder, like, am I doing a good job? Am I bringing value? Just look at the core values. And if you can put a check mark beside each one, I guarantee that you're doing a good job. And every business is different. Like if you go through that exercise, whether it's EOS or some other, business operating system, the outcomes are going to be different depending upon the leadership team, depending upon the history of the business, depending upon the market. And so I do think those are important things to define as a business, though. That's something that's been really helpful to set as a foundation of the brand and who we are as a company. So,
yeah. Well, since you mentioned David Reeve, I have my own Dave Reeve story that there was something that he inculcated very heavily at the time because he was sort of a culture champion, culture builder, right?
yeah,
And he often talked about empowerment, and I learned this one phrase he used all the time, and you'll remember this as soon as I say it. But he talked about sort of the good decision framework. If it's the right decision for the client, it's the right decision for the business, and it's the right thing to do, go ahead and make the decision. And the premise was, can you reliably delegate major decisions to your people so that you can let the business sort of start moving forward instead of just holding it back by being the bottleneck, as a small technical owner operator. And that
yeah,
always stuck with me. And I took that to Ook. That became one of our core values, was make great decisions. And it was based on
yeah.
that sort of phrasing of that. But talk to me a little bit about empowerment. What's been the journey to empower the team at Nucleus? Because, a business doesn't grow unless everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction and helping drive some of those decisions, obviously.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. And this is I say a lot of cliches, and this is one that also sticks with me, and I use a lot. But the whole delegate to elevate, model and the way of thinking, and I think the reality is we all struggle with a bit of, maybe control issues, or hey, it's maybe quicker if I do this, or I'm just going to take it all on and I'm going to put all this pressure. And you can only do that to a certain point, and that's something that I've realized over time in my career, where just delegating and trusting people, even if it's not perfect, giving people the opportunity to learn, giving people the opportunity to challenge themselves. Because I think ultimately the only way to grow is to put yourself into uncomfortable situations. And so you need to give people that challenge and opportunity. They need to have the opportunity to rise to the occasion. And delegate to elevate. It's one of my favorite things to kind of say and just, be mindful of, because yeah, you're, especially in a CEO seat, you're going to get a lot of information, a lot of requests, and it's like, should I delegate this? Should I work on this? Like it's a powerful way of looking at things. So
Yeah, for sure. Um, Man, there's just so much more things to uncover, and every time we sit down to have some tacos, which is,
been
a
a while.
highlight.
A couple of weeks ago, so it hasn't been that
Yeah,
long.
we hung out a couple weeks ago. We had some tacos. There's always, these little things that are going on, and there's maybe even in my own life, there's little things that are the things I am obsessed with at any given time. I'm curious what you're currently obsessed with. Like, what is this fascination that you have at the moment? Oh, it could be part of the business or just, something in
Oh yeah,
life.
I'm obsessed with. Yeah, I mean that's a good one. I mean, I obviously changing roles recently, right? So being a CEO at Nucleus for a long time, I was at Nucleus for 10 years up until the end of last year. Went through that transition, the baton pass, if you will, and really, moving from an operator, a hands-on operator that's a fast growth, fast moving company, to a rocket ship of a company, at a different layer, where now I'm the board lead for 5 Canadian MSPs, one of them being Nucleus still. And so, just it's changing that focus and adjusting to what that looks like, what that means. And so for me, I'm obsessed about, how can I best support these 5 Canadian companies, being a previous operator, learning what I've learned, getting to know the people, getting to know the businesses, getting to know the markets, and then really just focusing on Canada as a market and really trying to grow Canada from an M&A standpoint too. So um, I'm obsessed about that. You know, I think about it literally all day long, every day, 7 days a week, just thinking about angles, tactics. And I feel like now we're already in February. You know, January is gone. It's like, okay, there's 11 months in the year. You know, I'm running out of time, but you know, having a lot of fun. Getting to meet some cool people in different parts of Canada. You know, Ottawa, PEI, Toronto, other parts of Vancouver. So yeah, just you know, I'm obsessed about that opportunity. You know, because it's so new for Lyra, and now you know Canada being like its own kind of region, which is pretty cool. It's the first time it's ever been kind of carved out that way, and so that is my current obsession. You know, really trying to figure out how can I bring maximum value and you know support these operators.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of my favorite expressions or quotes out there is an Albert Einstein quote, which is, you know, the a great sign of intelligence is the ability to change your mind. And so along the same lines of these obsessions, it's always interesting to think about what things maybe have you revisited and changed your mind about that were pretty, you know, big deals, perhaps something that you'd um, dug your heels in the past. Is there anything that you've recently challenged yourself to revisit?
Not that I can think of right away. I mean, I would say like earlier on in my career, you know, anybody that's like ambitious, passionate, I think one of the potential flaws is, you know, either taking things too seriously or getting triggered too easily. And so, like, one of the things for me, another good quote that I live by, and you know, share this quote all the time is like, you know, don't get frustrated, get fascinated.
Yeah,
And,
I
you know,
use that too.
you know, that's been a good, like, you know, if I was the younger version of me in my 20s, and I can actually think of some, you know, epic moments where, you know, not my best moments, but you know, just getting too heated, too passionate, you know, too defensive on certain things, and you know, just realizing that you can only control what you can control, and some things are gonna fascinate you, but don't get like triggered about it. Don't get emotional. You know, try to understand it, try to unpack it a little bit, try to marinate on it for a little bit. Um, so you know, that's like one thing that you know I think about. You know, as I've come along, and instead of getting frustrated or mad, it's like life's too short.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
Um, since we're just dropping quotes left, right, and center,
Yeah.
the one I have to that topic is you can take the business seriously without having to take yourself too seriously, and I think that's sort of the interesting balance of it all, no doubt. Well, we kind of just meandered into the speed round questions here with some of these last few, and so I'm just going to continue down the path of some of these speed round questions. It's
So
the
we got
perfect
some
sort of
speed rounds.
way to
Okay.
round about. We were talking about food and tacos, but one of the questions I stole from Colbert is what's the best sandwich categorically?
You know what? My favorite sandwich right now is this place in Vancouver. It's why is the name escaping me? It's a Cubano. It's from. Oh, I'll have to text you after this
All right.
video. It's a Burgoo. It's a
Oh,
Cubano
burgoo.
from
Yeah, yeah.
Burgoo in Vancouver. They make the best Cubano. So yeah,
Okay.
I would say that's my go-to.
I'll put that on
Heavy
my
though, heavy
list.
though. I can't eat it all the time. It's definitely on the heavy side. You got to be hungry. Yeah.
You know, I think in the IT realm of things, we tend to be pack rats. Like each one of us has a box of USB cables. And so USB cables excluded, what's the one thing that you really should throw out?
Looking around my office right now. I don't want to say my sneakers, but I got a lot of those. But that's more of a collection. But you know, I'm not much of a hoarder to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's good. Keep the
Yeah.
mind clear and free.
You know, I used to be kind of more chaotic, but a little more organized these days. But yeah, I've yeah, I can't think of something I would throw out.
What's the most app used on your phone?
Right these days, Teams, I would say. But other than that, Instagram quite a bit, email, Twitter for complaining. You know.
Glad that you're leaning into that now. You
Yeah.
know, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I mean, more observant of that. Yeah.
yeah. Texting or talking?
Texting. I text a lot. Just more efficient. You know, I can multitask.
Yeah.
but I do like talking to you.
Yeah. Do you ask for permission or beg for forgiveness, or neither?
Definitely the latter. Sometimes it's just like, you know what, see what happens, and oh, okay, nobody noticed. But yeah,
And I think it's interesting. There's a I've been talking about this with a number of folks over the last few weeks, but there's a certain level of pragmatism that's maybe required to move a business forward. And in the context of MSP growth, sometimes you just can't dwell on decisions for too long. You just got to go make the thing happen. And this is also part of empowerment, I guess. You know, if you've let people know that if within these guardrails of doing the right thing, if you can make something happen, then go ahead. Like, don't let me be the bottleneck of your success,
well,
obviously. But yeah.
yeah. I mean, you just brought back a memory. Another good term that actually came from a meetup, but just the concept that the decision velocity is so important in business, right? Making decisions quickly, and you could probably think of a ton of examples. I can think of a lot of examples where some topic or something keeps coming up over a period of time, when you're like, have we not just called this? Are we still talking about this like 2 3 weeks later? Like, let's just make a decision now, right? So I think just be mindful of like making those quick decisions versus like dragging things out or prolonging certain things. Sometimes you just have to make an executive decision or on something quickly to just move
Yeah.
forward and make progress, right? Get some momentum going. So
Yeah. I love that. It takes it's a habit, right? It's a little bit of a
yeah,
muscle memory thing that you have to build to want to do that and not let yourself be overwhelmed by, well, there's another big decision. I need some time to think about it, whatever. I think that is so it will ultimately turns into a bit of the of desolate thinking about things for weeks and weeks on end. Um,
analysis paralysis, right? Just like
yeah.
going back and forth, and it's just like, hey, we got to call it. Like we spent too much time talking about this one topic. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's funny. I see this in whether it's the occasional Facebook group or a Slack group or Discord. MSPs are great at helping their clients make decisions, but suddenly when they have to make their own decisions, they end up just sort of in this back and forth. They need to know everybody's opinion before they make the decision, and so it's an interesting challenge that people sort of have for sure. And it's maybe just part of the evolution of growing into being an actual operator of a company as opposed to just sort of a person that loves tech, of course. But
yeah,
um,
there's a maturity aspect of that for sure. Yeah,
yeah. Martino, man, what a awesome opportunity to get to chat with you. Thanks for sharing so much of your experience. Best
no
of
problem.
luck in this new role that is is
Thank you.
is literally brand new, fresh,
Yes.
freshly minted.
Yes.
I'll be following closely to see how things are going with you and Lyra and Nucleus, of course. Thanks for your partnership with ScalePad, which I know has been a big deal. And yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'm sure we'll maybe do a check-in a little while down the road and see how things are
Do it.
going. In the meantime, taco date invitation coming pretty soon. And I'm going to go
Awesome.
try that Cubano at Burgu, no
Do
doubt.
it. Yeah. Order it. DoorDash. Thanks,
Awesome.
Luis. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Martino. And thanks, everybody else. You can find us every Friday here, 12 Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, MSP Confidential. Thanks for coming and tuning in, and we'll